The funeral parlor smelled of lilies and regret. I sat in the back row watching my family grieve for a woman who had spent the last 5 years of her life believing I was a disappointment. My brother David stood at the podium, delivering a eulogy that painted him as the devoted son who had sacrificed everything to care for our dying mother. It was a beautiful performance. Complete fiction but beautiful nonetheless. Our mother, Eleanor Stevens, lived a life of dignity and grace, David said, his voice catching with practiced emotion. She was blessed to have family who never left her side, who put her needs above their own ambitions and selfish pursuits. That last part was directed at me. I could feel the sideways glances from the mourners, the whispered comments about the daughter who had abandoned her family to chase dreams in the big city. If only they knew the truth. As David continued his speech about sacrifice and devotion, I thought about the real Eleanor Stevens. The woman who had called me 3 months ago, her voice weak from chemotherapy, to tell me she was changing her will. The woman who had finally learned what her golden boy son had really been doing with her money. "Hiya," she had whispered over the phone. "I need to see you. There are things I need to tell you. Things about David that I should have seen years ago. But I hadn't made it in time. Mom died 2 days before I could fly back from New York, taking her secrets with her. Or so David thought. The service ended and people began filing past the casket to pay their respects. I waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. Mom looked peaceful, finally free from the pain that had consumed her final months. I placed a single white rose on her casket and whispered, "I'm sorry I wasn't here, Mom. But I promise I'll make things right." Touching, David's voice came from behind me. "Though a little late, don't you think?" I turned to face my older brother. At 38, David had the kind of good looks that had always gotten him out of trouble: thick dark hair, charming smile, the ability to make people believe whatever story he was selling. Today, dressed in an expensive black suit that I knew Mom had paid for, he looked every inch the grieving son. "Hello, David. I'm surprised you came," he said, his voice loud enough for the remaining mourners to hear. "Given how little you cared about Mom these past few years." I felt the familiar sting of his words, but I kept my expression neutral. David had always been good at public performances, at making me look like the bad guy while he played the hero. "I cared about her more than you know." "Right. That's why you moved 3,000 miles away and barely visited. That's why you were too busy with your little art career to be here when she needed you." My little art career. If only he knew that my little art career had made me worth $47 million. If only he knew that Maya Stevens wasn't just some struggling artist living in a Brooklyn studio, but the founder and CEO of Visionary Digital Arts, one of the fastest-growing digital marketing agencies in the country. But David didn't know that. Nobody in my family did. For 3 years, I'd let them believe I was barely scraping by, living off ramen noodles and hope while I pursued my dreams. It was easier than dealing with their judgment, their attempts to control my money, their assumption that success meant conforming to their narrow definition of a proper life. "Where were you during her chemo treatments?" David continued, his voice rising. "Where were you when she was too weak to feed herself?" "I was here, Maya. I sacrificed my career, my relationship, everything to take care of her." Several family friends nodded sympathetically. Poor David, they seemed to think. Such a devoted son and such a selfish sister. If they only knew the truth. "You're right," I said quietly. "You were here." "I wasn't." David looked surprised by my admission. He'd been expecting a fight, drama he could use to further paint me as the villain. "At least you can admit it." "David dear," our Aunt Margaret approached, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "Eleanor was so lucky to have you. I don't know what she would have done without you these past 2 years." "It wasn't easy," David said, his eyes glistening with tears that looked remarkably real. "But family comes first. Some people understand that and others." He glanced at me meaningfully. Aunt Margaret followed his gaze, her expression cooling when she looked at me. "Maya, I wasn't sure you'd come. I wouldn't miss saying goodbye to Mom. Of course. Though it's a shame you weren't here to say hello more often when she was alive." I bit back my response. There would be time for truth later. Right now, I needed to let David continue believing he'd won. "Is the lawyer here yet?" David asked, checking his expensive watch. "We should get the will reading over with. I know this is difficult timing, but there are decisions that need to be made about the house and Mom's affairs." "Actually," a voice said from behind us, "I'm right here." We turned to see Harold Richardson, the family lawyer who had been handling Mom's legal affairs for 20 years. He was a thin, precise man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of serious demeanor that commanded respect. "Harold," David stepped forward with his most charming smile. "Thank you for coming. I know Mom would have appreciated you being here. Of course, Eleanor was a remarkable woman. I'm going to miss our conversations." Harold's eyes found mine across the small group. "Maya, I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Perhaps we could gather the immediate family for the reading? I know today is difficult, but Eleanor was quite specific about her wishes regarding timing." David nodded eagerly. "Of course. Maya, you should probably stay for this even though—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. "Even though I wouldn't be inheriting anything. Even though I'd forfeited any claim to Mom's estate by being an absent daughter. Even though David had made sure of that." We gathered in the funeral home's small conference room. David, myself, Aunt Margaret, and Harold. David sat at the head of the table like he was already the head of the family. I took a seat near the back, playing the role of the ashamed daughter who knew she didn't deserve to be there. Harold opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder. "Eleanor updated her will 3 months ago," he began. "She was very specific about her intentions and wanted to ensure there would be no confusion about her wishes." David leaned forward, his expression appropriately solemn but his eyes bright with anticipation. He'd been managing Mom's finances for the past 2 years, ostensibly to help her during her illness. I could see him mentally calculating the value of her estate: the house, her savings, her investment portfolio. What he couldn't see was the investigation I'd been quietly funding for the past 6 months. "As you know," Harold continued, "Eleanor's estate is substantial. The house in Beacon Hill is worth approximately $2.8 million. Her investment portfolio as of last month was valued at $3.2 million. There are also several smaller accounts and personal possessions." David nodded, his expression grave. "Mom was very smart with money. She always said she wanted to leave something meaningful for her family. Indeed she did." Harold's expression was unreadable as he opened the will. "However, before we begin the reading, I should mention that Eleanor also left a letter explaining her decisions. She asked that it be read aloud before the will itself." "A letter?" David's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "Yes. She wanted her family to understand her reasoning." Harold withdrew a sealed envelope and carefully opened it. "This is Eleanor's letter, written in her own hand and witnessed by myself and my associate." He cleared his throat and began to read. "To my family, if you are hearing this, then I am gone and it is time for the truth to come out. For the past 2 years, my son David has been managing my finances and my care. To the outside world, he appeared to be the perfect devoted son, sacrificing everything for his dying mother. The reality is quite different. 6 months ago, I discovered that David had been systematically stealing from me. He forged my signature on documents transferring money from my investment accounts to accounts he controlled. He convinced me to sign papers I thought were medical forms, but were actually financial documents giving him power of attorney beyond what I had intended. When I confronted him, he told me that I was confused, that my medications were affecting my memory. He made me doubt my own mind. But I wasn't confused. I was being robbed by my own son." The room was dead silent. David's face had gone completely white, his charming mask finally slipping. That's not true. Mom was sick, she was confused. Harold, you know how the medications affected her thinking." Harold held up a hand for silence and continued reading. "I hired a private investigator to look into David's activities. What they found was devastating. Over the past 2 years, David has stolen approximately $1.7 million from my accounts. He used the money to pay off gambling debts, to fund a lavish lifestyle, and to invest in a restaurant business that failed within 6 months. He convinced me that Maya had abandoned our family, that she was selfish and ungrateful. He showed me fake social media posts suggesting she was living in poverty by choice, pursuing art instead of a real career. He made me believe that my daughter didn't care about me. But Maya never abandoned me. She called every week. She sent money when she thought I needed it, though David intercepted most of her letters and gifts. She tried to visit, but David told her I was too sick to see anyone, that visitors would compromise my immune system. My daughter spent 3 years thinking I didn't want to see her, while I spent 3 years thinking she didn't want to see me. David orchestrated this separation to ensure that I would leave everything to him. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I forced myself to remain composed. Across the table, David was shaking his head frantically. "This is insane," he whispered. "Mom was sick. She was paranoid. Harold, you can't seriously believe." Eleanor was completely lucid when she wrote this, Harold said firmly. "I spoke with her extensively and I spoke with the private investigator she hired. The evidence of financial fraud is substantial." He continued reading. "I am heartbroken that I allowed David to manipulate me for so long. I am heartbroken that I doubted my daughter's love. I cannot undo the damage that has been done to our family, but I can ensure that justice is served. David, if you are hearing this, you should know that I discovered everything. The forged signatures, the fake medical emergencies that required expensive treatments that never happened, the stories you told me about Maya's supposed rejection of our family. I know about the gambling debts, the failed investments, the lies you told to cover your tracks. I am leaving you nothing, David. Nothing except the consequences of your choices and the hope that someday you will find a way to become the man I once believed you could be." The silence in the room was deafening. David sat frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Aunt Margaret looked shocked, her sympathetic expression replaced by horror and disbelief. Harold folded the letter carefully and picked up the will. Now, the reading of Eleanor Stevens' last will and testament. David found his voice, though it came out as a croak. "Harold, you have to understand. Mom was sick." He was confused. I would never steal from her. I was taking care of her." "According to the private investigator's report," Harold said calmly, "you were indeed taking care of her money. You were taking very good care of it, moving it into your own accounts. That's not Maya." David turned to me desperately. "You have to tell them. Tell them that Mom was confused, that her medications were affecting her judgment. You know I would never hurt her." I looked at my brother. This man who had spent years poisoning our mother against me, who had stolen from her while she was dying, who had made her last years filled with loneliness and doubt about her daughter's love. "Actually, David," I said quietly, "I know exactly what you did. Because I'm the one who hired the private investigator." The color drained completely from his face. "What?" 6 months ago, I started getting suspicious about why Mom never answered my calls, why my letters went unanswered, why she seemed to believe I didn't care about her. So I hired someone to look into it. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo. "This is you at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, 3 months ago, playing high-stakes poker with money stolen from Mom's medical fund." David stared at the photo like it was a poisonous snake. "How did you?" "I also have photos of you at the Mercedes dealership buying a car with Mom's money. Photos of you at expensive restaurants while telling everyone you were sacrificing everything to care for her. Bank records showing the fraudulent transfers. And audio recordings of you lying to Mom about my attempts to contact her. You recorded conversations with Mom?" David's voice was shrill now, desperate. "I recorded conversations with you, David. The investigator planted listening devices in Mom's house when you weren't there. We have recordings of you forging her signature, of you lying about her medical bills, of you telling her that I didn't want to see her." Harold cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should continue with the will reading?" I nodded, settling back in my chair. The truth was out now. There was no hiding anymore. I, Eleanor Stevens, being of sound mind and body, do hereby leave my entire estate to my daughter, Maya Stevens. David's world collapsed in those 11 words. "Everything," he whispered. "The house, the investments, everything?" "Everything," Harold confirmed. "The house, all financial accounts, personal possessions, and any assets not specifically mentioned elsewhere in the document. But I took care of her. I gave up everything. David's voice broke. "This isn't fair. Maya wasn't even here." "Maya wasn't here because you made sure she couldn't be here," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "You spent 2 years convincing Mom that I didn't love her, while stealing her money and isolating her from the daughter who was desperately trying to reach her. I didn't mean for." "You didn't mean for what, David? You didn't mean to get caught." Aunt Margaret was staring at David like she'd never seen him before. "David, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't steal from your dying mother. David opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say. The evidence was overwhelming and we all knew it. Harold continued with the technical details of the will, but I barely heard them. All I could think about was Mom alone in that house, believing that her daughter had abandoned her. All I could think about was the phone calls that went unanswered because David told her I was too busy to care. All I could think about was the letters I'd written that she never received. There is one more thing, Harold said, pulling another document from his folder. Eleanor also left a detailed account of the financial fraud, along with her wishes regarding prosecution. David's head snapped up. Prosecution. Eleanor wanted to leave the decision up to Maya. She felt that as the heir to the stolen money, Maya should decide whether to pursue criminal charges. All eyes turned to me. David's face was a mask of terror and desperate hope. Maya, he said, his voice breaking. Please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm your brother. I'm family. Mom wouldn't want you to destroy me over this. I studied his face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse, any indication that he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. Instead, I saw only panic at being caught, fear of consequences, and the calculating look of someone trying to figure out how to minimize the damage. David, I said slowly, do you understand what you did to Mom? Do you understand how she spent her final months believing that her daughter didn't love her? I never meant for that to happen. I was just trying to protect her from being hurt. Protect her? You stole $1.7 million from her medical care fund while she was dying of cancer. You isolated her from her family. You made her last years lonely and filled with doubt. How exactly was that protecting her? I was going to pay it back. The restaurant was going to be successful, and I was going to pay back every penny. With what money, David? You gambled away most of what you stole. The restaurant failed because you had no business experience and no real investment capital. You were never going to pay anything back. David's composure finally cracked completely. Please, Maya. Please don't destroy me over this. I'll do anything. I'll pay back whatever I can. I'll get a job, I'll work for the rest of my life to make this right. Just please don't send me to prison. I looked at this man who had been the golden child, the favorite son, the one who could do no wrong in Mom's eyes. For years, I had envied him, had wished I could have the easy relationship with our parents that he seemed to enjoy. Now I understood that it had all been an illusion. David had never been the perfect son. He had been a skilled manipulator, using charm and lies to maintain a facade while slowly destroying our family from within. Harold, I said, what are the legal implications of the evidence we have? The financial fraud is clear and substantial. The forged documents alone constitute multiple felonies. Combined with the elder abuse aspects of isolating Eleanor from her family and lying about her medical care, we're looking at serious criminal charges. David was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. Maya, please. I'm begging you. Don't do this to me. I felt a strange calm settle over me. For 3 years, I had carried the guilt of believing I had failed our mother. For 3 years, I had wondered if I was selfish for pursuing my career, for building my life in New York instead of staying home. For 3 years, I had believed that I was the bad daughter, the one who had abandoned her family when they needed her most. Now I knew the truth. And the truth changed everything. David, I said quietly, I'm going to give you a choice. The same choice you gave Mom when you were stealing from her, but more generous than you deserve. He looked up hopefully. What kind of choice? You can cooperate fully with returning whatever assets you still have access to. You can provide a complete accounting of everything you stole and where it went. You can write a letter of apology to Mom's memory and to every family member you lied to about me. And you can check yourself into a treatment program for gambling addiction. And if I do all that, I won't pursue criminal charges. David's relief was palpable. Yes, I'll do all of that. Whatever you want. I'll make this right, Maya. I promise. I'm not finished, I said calmly. There's one more condition. Anything. You can never contact me again. You're not my brother anymore, David. Brothers don't steal from their dying mothers. Brothers don't manipulate their sisters and poison their relationships with their parents. Whatever we once were to each other ended when you chose money over family. David's face crumpled. Maya, you can't mean that. We're family. We're all the family each of us has left now. No, I said, standing up from my chair. Family are the people who love you and support you and tell you the truth. Family are the people who show up for you when life gets difficult. You're not my family, David. You're just someone who happens to share my DNA. I turned to Harold. Please prepare whatever documents are necessary to transfer the estate. I'll want a complete forensic accounting of what was stolen and what can be recovered. And Harold? I want a restraining order filed against David. He's not to contact me or come within 500 feet of any property I own. Paya. David's voice was desperate now. You can't do this. I'm your brother. I stopped at the door and looked back at him one last time. My brother died the day he decided that stealing from our dying mother was acceptable. The person sitting in that chair is just a stranger who made very bad choices. As I walked out of the funeral home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The guilt was gone, replaced by clarity and purpose. Mom's money would be used to honor her memory. I was already planning a foundation in her name to help families dealing with elder fraud and financial abuse. David would face the consequences of his choices, just as I had faced the consequences of mine. The difference was that my choices had been based on love and ambition and the desire to build something meaningful. His had been based on greed and selfishness and the willingness to destroy family bonds for personal gain. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant in New York. The Patterson deal closed successfully. Your net worth just hit $50 million. Congratulations, boss. I smiled, thinking about how different my life was from what my family had believed. Maya Stevens, the struggling artist living in poverty, was actually Maya Stevens, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. The daughter who had supposedly abandoned her family was actually the daughter who had tried desperately to maintain contact despite every obstacle her brother had placed in her way. But none of that mattered as much as the letter Harold had given me as I left. A letter Mom had written specifically for me, separate from the will. I sat in my rental car and opened it with trembling hands. My dearest Maya, if you are reading this, then the truth has finally come out, and I pray you can forgive a foolish old woman for doubting your love. David showed me things that made me believe you didn't want to see me. He told me stories about your life that painted you as selfish and uncaring. But in my heart I always knew better. A mother knows her child's heart, and I knew yours was good. I failed you, Maya. I failed to see through David's lies, and I failed to reach out to you directly when I had doubts. I let fear and illness and medication cloud my judgment, but that's no excuse for allowing our relationship to suffer. I love you, my darling daughter. I have always loved you, and I am so proud of who you have become. Don't let David's actions poison your heart against family. Someday you may find people who love you the way family should, with honesty and loyalty and unwavering support. Build a life filled with people who deserve your love. Build a legacy that honors the values we taught you when you were small: kindness, integrity, hard work, and compassion for others. And Maya? Don't carry guilt about not being here at the end. He tried to be here. David made sure you couldn't be. That's on him, not on you. I love you always. I sat in that parking lot and cried for the first time since hearing about Mom's death. I cried for the relationship we'd lost, for the time that had been stolen from us, for the words we'd never had the chance to say. But I also cried with relief. Relief that she had known the truth at the end. Relief that she had never stopped loving me. Relief that I could stop carrying the guilt of believing I had failed her. David had stolen a lot of things: money, time, trust, and peace of mind. But he hadn't been able to steal the most important thing of all: the love between a mother and daughter. And in the end, that love had won. As I drove away from the funeral home, I thought about the foundation I would create in Mom's name, about the good that could come from this tragedy, about the future I would build with the family I chose rather than the family I was born into. David had tried to write the story of our family, casting himself as the hero and me as the villain. But stories have a way of revealing their own truth, and the truth always wins in the end. The real story wasn't about the perfect son and the disappointing daughter. It was about love surviving lies, about justice prevailing over manipulation, and about a mother's final act of courage in setting the record straight. It was about understanding that sometimes, the family who loves you most is the family you choose, not the family you're born into. And it was about forgiveness. Not for David, who had shown no genuine remorse, but for myself, for carrying guilt that was never mine to bear. As I headed to the airport to fly back to New York, back to the life and the people who had supported me when my biological family had failed me, I felt Mom's presence with me. Not the confused, manipulated woman David had created, but the strong, loving mother who had raised me to be independent and successful and kind. She was gone, but her love remained. And that was worth more than any inheritance, more than any revenge, more than any satisfaction in seeing David face the consequences of his actions. Love, it turned out, was the one thing that thieves could never steal.